I was just doing the dishes, the warm water running over my hands, humming quietly to myself because, honestly, it was one of the few moments in the day where I could just breathe. Our apartment was small but cozy, the morning sunlight slipping through the curtains and making the kitchen feel almost golden. My toddler was napping. Mark was somewhere across the city taking care of his freelance work, and for a moment, everything seemed normal, calm, predictable. I loved that. I needed that. Then it happened. A small splash of water hit Mark's phone sitting carelessly on the counter, and instantly it lit up. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it would just beep and die off. But instead, it started playing a voicemail. That familiar beep, that casual greeting I had heard 100 times before, was gone. And then came the voice that shattered everything. I froze. My hands, still wet from the dishes, hovered over the sink, and I couldn't move. Every word felt heavy, like it was pushing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't funny. It wasn't a greeting. It was raw, unfiltered, and filled with things I wasn't prepared to hear. The kind of things that change the way you see someone you thought you knew completely. For a few seconds, I just stood there, not processing it, my mind looping over the same words, the same tone, the same feeling of betrayal that I couldn't yet name. My heart pounded, my stomach dropped, and my hands shook so badly I almost let the sponge slip. And that's when I realized my life as I knew it, my safe little world, had already started to crumble. The next few days were surreal. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't play with my kid without feeling a constant gnawing tension. Mark seemed off, distracted, quiet, occasionally glancing at his phone with a furtive glance that made my chest tighten. I kept thinking maybe I had misheard it. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I could feel it in every glance, every half answer, every small lie he told without even thinking about it. It wasn't just a voicemail anymore. It was a warning, a whisper of a truth that I couldn't ignore, a reality that was slowly seeping into every corner of my life. And I started noticing the small things, the little cracks in the life I thought we had built together. The way he avoided my questions, the late-night calls that he would take behind closed doors, the tenseness in the air when I asked too much. One afternoon, curiosity and fear got the better of me. Mark was in the living room on a call, his voice casual, light, oblivious to the storm building around him. I saw a small envelope on the table, addressed to him. Something inside me whispered not to touch it, but I couldn't help it. I slid it out, carefully, quietly, and opened it. Inside were papers, emails, photographs. At first, it didn't make sense. But the more I looked, the more my heart sank. The images, the messages, the secrets, they weren't just lies between Mark and me. This went deeper, much deeper. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Every secret, every betrayal, every injustice he had hidden came to life in front of me. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just personal. This wasn't just about us. The web he had been entangled in, the things he had hidden, were connected to something much bigger. People I didn't know, people I trusted, maybe even people I cared about, were involved. And suddenly, my small, comfortable life felt like it was slipping through my fingers, like I had been blind to everything that was really going on around me. I remember sitting there, the envelope trembling in my hands, trying to make sense of it all. Fear, anger, disbelief, It swirled in my chest until I felt like I might actually collapse. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw everything across the room, but there was no one there. Just me, the papers, and the unbearable weight of truth. And then I thought about the voicemail again. That simple, ordinary sound of his phone playing. The moment that started all of this was no longer just a small accident in the kitchen. It was the first crack in the wall, the beginning of everything falling apart. I realized how fragile trust can be, how quickly the life you think is stable can dissolve when the truth finally comes to light. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the images, heard the words, and felt the tension like a knot in my chest that I couldn't untie. I kept replaying every interaction, every small lie, every glance, trying to find the moment I should have seen it coming, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. And yet, through the fear, the anger, the heartbreak, a small, quiet part of me knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to face it. I had to confront it. Not just for myself, not just for Mark, but for the people whose lives were caught up in the secrets he had hidden. That was when I realized my life had changed. Not just a little, not just in a small, personal way, but fundamentally. There was no going back to the person I had been, to the life I had thought I knew. And for better or worse, I had no choice but to step forward into the storm, to confront the truths I had been thrust into, and to find out how deep this went. It was terrifying, overwhelming, and heartbreaking. But for the first time, I also felt a spark of something else. Determination, courage, the unwillingness to let fear or deceit dictate the rest of my life. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I had to face it. And in that moment, I silently promised myself I would uncover everything, no matter the cost. The next morning, the envelope still lay on the table, untouched. I kept walking past it, pretending it wasn't there, but every time I glanced, my stomach tightened. I couldn't ignore it forever. I finally sat down, heart hammering, and picked it up again. I unfolded the papers, scanned the emails, and my mind refused to catch up with what I was seeing. Some of the messages were official, almost legal in tone, others personal, secret arrangements, hidden agreements, things Mark had never mentioned. The photographs, they were worse. Faces of people I didn't know, situations that seemed wrong, unfair, and completely secret from the world I thought I lived in. I felt sick. The room felt smaller, heavier, almost suffocating, and I had to lean back against the wall, gripping the envelope so tightly my knuckles turned white. Questions raced through my mind. How long had this been going on? Who else knew? How could Mark have kept this from me? My throat burned, my chest ached, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about a lie between us. This was bigger. Far bigger. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I had ignored before. A strange tension in Mark's voice when he answered his phone. Quick glances, almost guilty, when I walked past his workspace. Emails disappearing from the screen too quickly. Calls ending the second I entered the room. Every little thing now seemed loaded with meaning, and every little thing confirmed the dread that had been growing inside me since that first voicemail. I started keeping notes, trying to piece together the puzzle that was our life. Names, times, locations, repeated patterns in the communications I found. Every new piece of information was like a small explosion in my chest, a reminder that the person I trusted most might not be who I thought he was. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no escaping it. Then came the moment I would never forget. I was cleaning the living room, trying to calm my racing thoughts, when Mark's phone buzzed again. This time, I couldn't help myself. I picked it up. The screen flashed with a voicemail notification. My hands were shaking, but I pressed play anyway. The voice that came out of the speaker was calm, almost casual. But what it said made my blood run cold. Every word confirmed the worst fears I'd been trying to ignore. The secrets, the manipulations, the hidden actions. They weren't mistakes. They weren't small lies. They were deliberate. I sank to the floor, tears burning my eyes. Anger surged through me, hot and sharp, but beneath it was a deeper, colder fear. How could someone I loved be capable of this? How could I have been so blind? Every memory of our life together suddenly felt fragile, tainted. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. I just sat there, listening, absorbing, and trying to understand how everything I believed had been built on secrets. Days turned into restless nights. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces, heard words, remembered tiny moments that now carried a weight I hadn't noticed before. I realized that the injustice I was uncovering wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Someone's pain, someone's rights, had been disregarded, manipulated, and hidden. And the person I loved had been part of it, either willingly or blindly complicit. Finally, I knew I had to confront him. But the idea terrified me, not because I was afraid of him, though part of me was, but because I didn't know how he would react, and I didn't know how much the truth would hurt. Every step toward him felt like walking across a tightrope stretched over a bottomless pit. One wrong move, one wrong word, and everything could collapse even further. I remember standing in the doorway of the living room, the envelope clutched in my hand, my stomach twisting, my hands trembling. Mark was on his laptop, completely unaware of what I now knew. The silence between us felt thick, suffocating, almost alive. I tried to form the words in my mouth, but they stuck. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand the truth, but I had to stay calm. I had to think. I had to survive this moment with my mind clear enough to understand what I was dealing with. Then he looked up, smiling, oblivious. That smile, so familiar, so ordinary, made my chest tighten even more, because I realized something terrifying. The person I loved, the life I had trusted, had been built alongside deceit, manipulation, and secrets I was only now seeing. And the longer I stayed silent, the more I realized that this web wasn't just about us. Others were tangled in it, people I had never even met, whose lives might have been ruined quietly, carefully, without them knowing. I wanted answers. I needed answers. And in that moment, I understood that finding them would be dangerous, painful, and possibly life-changing. But I couldn't turn back. I wouldn't. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of fear, anger, and determination all at once. This was the moment I had been preparing for, even if I hadn't known it. I had to confront the truth, no matter how shattering, no matter the cost. Because if I didn't, the injustice, the secrecy, and the lies would continue. And I couldn't live with that, not for myself, not for anyone else who might be affected. I stepped closer, feeling the tension tighten around my chest like a vice. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. I raised the envelope slightly, my hands shaking, and finally spoke. "Mark, we need to talk. Now." And in that instant, everything changed. I remember standing there, the envelope trembling in my hands, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure Mark could hear it, even though he hadn't looked up yet. I could see the familiar comfort in his face, the same smile he always wore, completely out, not aware that my world had just been ripped apart. And that was the moment I realized the person I loved, the life I trusted, had been built on a foundation of secrets so deep I wasn't sure I could ever recover from them. I finally forced the words out, my voice shaking, almost whispering, "Mark, we need to talk, now." He froze, laptop still open, his smile fading, replaced by something I didn't recognize. Confusion? Fear? Guilt? All of it? I couldn't tell, and honestly, it terrified me more than anything else. I handed him the envelope. I watched his fingers brush against the papers, and the moment his eyes scanned the first email, I felt my chest tighten, as if someone had wrapped a steel band around it. His face changed slowly, imperceptibly at first, then dramatically. The kind of change that makes you realize someone isn't who you thought they were. Shock, panic, recognition, and beneath it all, fear. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers, but my voice caught in my throat. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, one wrong move away from falling into a bottomless pit. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? Who else was involved? How could I have missed it? Every memory of our life together, the laughter, the quiet mornings, the shared dreams, suddenly felt like a story someone had written for me, a story I hadn't been allowed to see in full. Then the voicemail replayed in my head, the one that had started all of this. The words, calm and deliberate, now took on a new weight, a sinister meaning I hadn't understood before. I realized the truth wasn't just shocking, it was deliberate. Every lie, every secret, every omission had been calculated, and I was living in the middle of it. Mark finally spoke, his voice low, hesitant, trying to explain, but the words didn't make sense anymore. They sounded empty, rehearsed. I could feel the anger building, rising like a tide inside me. I wanted to break down, to cry, to throw the papers across the room. But beneath the fear and shock, something else surfaced. A cold, fierce determination. I couldn't let this go. I wouldn't. I demanded clarity. I needed every answer, every hidden action, every secret, every injustice. I had to know the full scope of what had happened, no matter how unbearable it was. And as he reluctantly started revealing things, my world shattered piece by piece. Lies I had never imagined, manipulations I hadn't seen, secrets that affected people beyond our home, beyond our lives. Everything spilled out in a torrent that left me gasping, tears streaming and heart aching. I felt helpless, enraged, betrayed, but also deeply aware that this moment, horrifying as it was, marked a turning point. I wasn't just a victim of deceit. I was a witness to injustice, a participant in the unraveling of a web that had hurt far more than just me. And though it was terrifying, it also gave me clarity. I had to act, to confront the consequences, to step forward, even if it meant my life, my relationships, everything would change forever. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt distorted. I don't remember when the tears stopped, but I do remember the cold, hard clarity that replaced them. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. The injustice, the lies, the betrayal. It wasn't just ours. It belonged to anyone who had ever been deceived, ignored, or hurt by someone they trusted. And then, in the quiet of the living room, with the envelope lying between us like a symbol of everything broken, Mark said something that I'll never forget. A wordless pause, a glance that admitted guilt without needing to speak. It was the kind of moment that changes everything. I realized that my life, my trust, my very sense of safety, had been altered forever. There was no going back. Not after everything I had seen, not after the weight of the truth had settled into my bones. I felt fear, yes, and heartbreak, but beneath it all was a flicker of something else. Strength, resolve. The knowledge that the truth, though painful, had given me a power I hadn't had before. The power to demand justice, the power to act, the power to protect myself and others from the same hidden harms. By the end of that night, I wasn't the same person who had picked up that voicemail in the kitchen. I was someone who had been forced to confront betrayal in its rawest, most terrifying form, and had survived it. I didn't yet know what the consequences would be, or how the next steps would unfold, but I knew one thing. I would not be silenced. I would not look away. And no matter how much it hurt, I would face the truth, fully, unflinchingly. And as I sat there in the dark, staring at the papers, listening to the echoes of a life I thought I knew, I asked myself quietly, almost to the universe itself, how many others are living in this kind of hidden reality, trusting blindly, unaware of the shadows waiting just beneath the surface? And I realized, for the first time, that this wasn't just my story. It was part of a much larger story, one that deserved to be seen, to be heard, to demand change. The morning after that night, the apartment felt strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that presses down on you, making every sound outside seem louder, sharper, heavier. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the envelope, the papers, and the phone. And for a long moment, I just breathed, slowly. I had survived the storm, but the aftermath was a different kind of storm, one that settled deep in your chest, tightening with every thought. Mark had left for work, still unaware, I think, of the weight of what had happened. Or maybe he did know, and the truth was that his silence was part of the pattern I had been unraveling all along. Either way, the silence was mine now, and I needed it to think, to plan, to decide what to do next. The betrayal, the lies, the injustice. I couldn't erase them. I couldn't pretend they hadn't happened. But I could choose what they would make of me. I started reaching out, to friends, to colleagues, even to people whose names appeared in the documents. I had questions, but more than that, I had a responsibility. I couldn't ignore what I had uncovered. The secrets weren't just harmful to me, they were harmful to others, innocent people who might have been quietly hurt without ever knowing why. Every conversation I had, every call I made, reminded me of how interconnected we all are, how hidden truths ripple outwards in ways we don't always see until they crash down. The days that followed were exhausting, emotionally draining, and often terrifying. But there was also a strange kind of empowerment in facing the truth, even when it was painful. Every time I confronted someone with evidence, every time I demanded accountability, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe not for everything to be fixed, not for every injustice to be corrected, but hope that some things could be changed, at least a little. That was enough to keep me moving forward. I realized something important during those long, tense days. Injustice, betrayal, and secrecy don't just harm individuals, they harm communities. They erode trust, breed fear, and quietly let the powerful hide behind lies. And the worst part is that it can happen anywhere, to anyone, even in homes that seem ordinary, safe, and loving. But the moment someone refuses to look away, refuses to stay silent, that's when change becomes possible. I won't lie. There were nights when I cried, when the weight of it all pressed on me so heavily, I felt like I might break. But even in that pain, I felt a determination rising inside me. The kind of determination that comes when you realize you can't let fear dictate your life. I had to speak, to act, to demand accountability, not just for myself, but for anyone who might be affected by the same hidden injustices. Looking back, I understand that my life will never be the same. I can't unhear what I heard, can't unsee the evidence in those documents, can't undo the betrayal, but I can carry it forward as a reminder that silence protects wrongdoing, that ignoring truth allows harm to continue, and that standing up, even when it's terrifying, is the only way to make a difference. I thought about all the people whose voices were never heard, whose stories were buried in silence, whose pain went unnoticed. I thought about how easily life can be manipulated behind closed doors, and how courage, however small, can illuminate even the darkest corners. And I realized that what I had been through wasn't just my story. It was a reflection of countless untold stories, of hidden injustices that demand attention. And so I made a choice to act, to speak, to make sure the truth I uncovered would be seen, understood, and acknowledged. I can't fix everything, and I can't undo the harm that's already been done, but I can refuse to be silent. And that refusal, I believe, is the first step toward justice. Sometimes I still sit and think about that voicemail, about the moment it all started. The fear, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It's still there, lingering in the corners of my mind. But so is the clarity, the strength, and the resolve. I know now that no one can take that from me. Not secrets, not lies, not even the most shocking betrayals. And I wonder, how many others are living in quiet deception right now, trusting blindly, unaware of the shadows around them? How many lives could be changed if someone, anyone, dared to speak the truth? That thought stays with me every day, and it drives me forward. Because silence doesn't protect anyone, courage does. And sometimes, courage starts with one person, standing up, refusing to look away, and telling their story. This is my story. And it's not just mine. It belongs to anyone who's been and betrayed. Anyone who's faced hidden injustice. Anyone who has felt powerless in the face of secrets. It's a reminder that the world is bigger than our homes, bigger than our fears, and that speaking up, even when it's terrifying, is the only way to change it. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. Every routine task, making breakfast, folding laundry, even brushing my teeth, was colored by what had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that the world had changed overnight, that the life I thought I knew had been pulled out from under me. And yet, somehow, I felt lighter. Not free from pain, not free from anger, not free from fear, but free in the sense that I was no longer pretending, no longer ignoring, no longer hiding from the truth. I began to organize the evidence, the documents, the emails, and the photographs. I reached out to people who could help, people who could make sense of the chaos and bring clarity to what I had uncovered. It wasn't easy. Every phone call, every conversation, opened wounds I thought were already raw enough. But each time I pushed through, I felt a sense of control returning. I was taking my life back, piece by piece. Even though Mark and I no longer shared the same life, the lessons from that time stayed with me. I learned the hard way how fragile trust can be, how easily secrets can erode the foundations of love and security, and how necessary it is to pay attention to the small things, the fleeting glances, the hidden messages, the patterns that quietly reveal themselves over time. I also learned something more profound, that the injustices we face personally are often part of a larger picture. The manipulations, the lies, the betrayals, they don't exist in isolation. They are threads woven into systems, communities, even cultures that allow harm to persist quietly. And while I couldn't fix everything, I could choose to act where I could, to shine light where darkness had settled, and to speak truth when others might stay silent. There were moments of fear, moments where I questioned if I had done the right thing, if confronting the truth was worth the cost. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, feeling small, overwhelmed, unsure of what the next day would bring. But alongside that fear was a growing strength, a resilience I hadn't realized I possessed until I was forced to reach deep inside myself. I discovered courage I didn't know existed, courage born not from recklessness, but from necessity. And now, as I look back on everything, I understand that my story isn't just about betrayal or secrets. It's about survival, about the power of acknowledging the truth, no matter how painful, and about refusing to let hidden injustice continue unchallenged. Every person who hides, who ignores, who pretends not to see, the world suffers because of it. And every person who dares to speak, who dares to act, can spark change, however small it may seem at first. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I replay that morning in my mind, the dishes, the splash of water, the voicemail that started it all. I remember the shock, the heartbreak, the anger. I remember the fear that made my hands shake, the disbelief that made my chest tighten. And I remember the moment I decided I wouldn't let it define me, that I would face the truth no matter how terrifying it was. That decision changed everything. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how the people involved will respond, or if justice will ever be fully served. But I do know this. I am no longer silent. I am no longer unaware. And I will not let the darkness of deception or the weight of hidden injustice dictate my life or the lives of others around me. So I ask myself, and I ask anyone listening, how many lives are being quietly manipulated, secretly harmed, or betrayed without their knowledge? How many stories, like mine, are waiting to be told? And more importantly, what are we willing to do to stand up, speak out, and demand truth? I am Alec Rose, and this is my story. It is painful, it is shocking, and it is real. But it is also a story of resilience, of courage, and of refusing to let silence protect wrongdoing. And if nothing else, I hope it inspires you to pay attention, to listen, and to act when the truth demands it. Because sometimes that is the only way to make the world a little brighter, a little safer, and a little more just.